Why is fiber so important for gut health? What's the process or the need?
Oh, yeah. So if you think back to
You've got
what I presented about the Hadza in Tanzania and how much fiber they eat, they're eating up to 50 grams of fiber a day, whereas the Western diet is devoid of fiber, mostly because of all the processing of the food. But the importance of fiber is that it's our way of communicating with the gut microbiome. So fibers are basically carbohydrates. They're short-chain carbohydrates that are not able to be digested by our own enzymes. So they bypass digestion in the stomach and the small intestine. They go to the large intestine where they become food for the gut microbiome. And they become a fuel for them. And as a result, what they do is they transform those fibers into what we call short-chain fatty acids. So things like butyrate, propionate, and acetate. But out of those three, the most important one is butyrate, because butyrate, it serves several roles. Butyrate is the primary energy source for the cells that line the colon. So butyrate helps keep your colon healthy and actually helps lower the risk for colon cancer. But the remarkable thing about butyrate is that it crosses the gut barrier as well, because it's a fatty acid, so it can go through the lipid membrane. And it influences insulin sensitivity as well. So it serves a role in blood sugar regulation. But I think the most remarkable thing about butyrate is that it crosses the blood-brain barrier, and it has an epigenetic effect in the brain that increases the production of what Max mentioned earlier, brain-derived neurotrophic factor. So butyrate from the gut helps you form memory and create new neural connections. So if you want a healthier brain, you need to eat more fiber.
So what are the biggest things we can eat for fiber?
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, starting with leafy greens, and then like Dr. Momo was talking about complex carbohydrates, and then the question is which ones are right for you based on your microbiome. But I mean, the easiest way to start is we're not eating enough greens. You know, the average American eats about 2 to 3 servings of vegetables a day. A serving is about a cup. We should be getting 8 to 9 servings per day. So just even starting with that, increasing that. There's fiber in berries. Bananas have fiber. So really thinking about varying the diet, and like I mentioned, tubers. I mean, if you look throughout the world population, there's a lot of tubers.
What's a tuber?
A tuber is like a root vegetable. Sorry.
Name some.
Tubers are like cassava, like
Sweet potatoes, yams?
sweet potatoes, yeah, exactly. So those are all tubers. And they're all in this classification kind of like potatoes, but they're different. They've got, potatoes are a lot of starch, not a lot of fiber. So tubers have a lot of fiber, not a lot of starch.
What else that we could get?
Greens.
Actually,
Yeah.
wheat also has a lot of fibers. So
Yeah.
just go look at the different look at the nutritional information. So wheat has fiber, brown rice has fiber, and then inulin, for example, is found in artichokes or these are Jerusalem artichokes, chicory roots. So psyllium, for example, is a great source of fiber. Inulin is a fiber you can buy. You can buy it organic from Amazon. Just order it. And inulin is one of these fibers that we cannot, inulin, I-N-U-L-I-N,
And we
inulin.
can have it in a pill?
You can, no, it's not a pill, it's just powder, and you add it to your shakes, for example.
I will add a caution on that, because inulin is a prebiotic. So it's another way of saying a fiber is a prebiotic. Prebiotics are what feeds the gut microbiome. But prebiotics can also lead to fermentation, and the byproduct is gas, right? So if you
and SIBO as well.
Yeah, and it could lead to imbalances, so like a dysbiosis. So if you're going to add any prebiotic, like in a powder form, you can start with like a 1/4 teaspoon. You start really small, testing, seeing what your body can tolerate. And if you start getting very bloated by taking a prebiotic supplement, then that might be a clue that you have a dysbiosis that needs to be dealt with.
Yeah, so we are just listing general prebiotics, but not all of these are good for everyone. So.
And what about
But everyone should be eating greens.
What about
And
what about beans? beans?
Yeah, that's a big question because, you know, there's all this stuff now about lectins
Yes,
and
so
the
I'd
effect
love
and
you to tell us.
anti-nutrients. But I just learned that Cuba is a blue zone, and in the
You eat a lot of rice and
ancestral
beans.
diet, there's white rice and black beans.
For sure.
And there's
Same in
so
Brazil, where
But they
we
also
live.
have a very different gut microbiome from Americans. So just because beans work for them doesn't mean they're going
Right.
to work for us.
Exactly.
Very agricultural country. We have an autism study right now. Cousins of Cubans who still live in Cuba and their cousins who have immigrated to the United States, the cousins in the United States have 10 to 100 times greater incidence of autism. So genetically, they're essentially identical, but the lifestyle is different, and autism rates are massive in the United States. So
Understood.
very different lifestyle.
Is a diverse microbiome what we're after?
I want to say something more about butyrate. Butyrate is a great anti-inflammatory chemical, great anti-inflammatory. So if you have a normal digestion, normal gut microbiome, and eat a lot of fibers, and your gut microbiome is very happy because you're feeding it essentially, it's sending the signal of butyrate to our immune system saying it's all good here, you're fine. If butyrate is missing, your immune system freaks out and thinks something is wrong and mounts an inflammatory response. So that's one of the biggest effects we've observed, anti-inflammatory.
I actually use sometimes in patients who come in with severely disordered gut health and leaky gut, as I'm taking them through the healing process, I will put them on a butyrate supplement.
So unfortunately, butyrate supplement gets absorbed in the small intestine and gets processed by liver. So really the colonic production of butyrate is what we've only observed as associated with lower inflammation. So instead of butyrate supplement, we definitely recommend something like inulin or a different kind of a fiber to feed the microbiome, if they have it. If they don't have the right microbiome, then that's the last resort.
In cases with ulcerative colitis, you can actually do butyrate enemas.
Right, right.
Butyrate enemas.
Not fun, probably.
Okay. Is a diverse microbiome what we are after? And can we reverse chronic disease by diversifying our gut bacteria?
I can take that, my opinion. Yeah, so definitely we need to have a diverse gut. So that's why I said, please go read about rewilding the gut and follow his advice that he gave you. It was number 1, I think, diversify your gut. So just think of the human body as we have evolved to depend on chemicals produced by our gut microbiome. And these are hundreds or thousands of chemicals. And if you're missing microbes capable of producing those chemicals, like these short-chain fatty acids and vitamins, you simply don't get that benefit. And so you have to have a diversity. But there's more to it because depending on who is inside your gut, you have to adjust your diet to feed those members of your gut, and so that they can produce those beneficial chemicals. So there's
And
two
how
parts.
are we going to know which microbes are in our gut?
Well, you should
You have to
speak
do a
that.
test. I mean, you have to do a
Where
molecular
are we
test.
going to get the test?
Well, so I'm very biased.
Yes.
So I think our test is the best. But there are now companies offering these tests. But ours is the only functional gut microbiome test, which means that our test is the only one that has a readout of what the microbes are doing, not just who is there.
Oh, great, because that was going to be my second question is, does an average microbiome test tell which microbes are overpopulated and which ones are lacking?
Yeah, it does. It does. All of the
An
tests
average test will tell
yes.
that, but your Viome's tests tell that it's what the microbes are doing.
Well,
If
we don't
you
actually
name
we don't
them?
actually give that information to the customers. And honestly, I don't look at my test results. I look at my recommendations, and I follow my recommendations. You know, knowing that I have Escherichia coli in my gut microbiome, I know what that means because I've sort of developed this technology. But a common person will maybe read something bad about E. coli, and they'll say, "Oh my God, I have E. coli." But E. coli, turns out, there are strains of E. coli that help you absorb iron. You guys have heard about how some people just absorb poorly iron, right? That's not some magic. It's your gut microbiome has evolved to help you absorb iron. And Escherichia coli is known as a bad pathogen, and certainly there are strains of bad E. coli. But there are also some that are very beneficial. So if you see E. coli in your test, there's nothing necessarily wrong about it. But again,
Well,
yeah.
I will add something to that because I'm so this is Viome is direct to consumer, and I'm on the practitioner side. So I'm doing analysis on the microbiome that I can act upon based on dysbiosis, imbalances. So I used slightly different types of testing that give me information that for me is useful clinically. So it depends on what you're looking for.
Will that lead to, precision nutrition? Will your recommendations be able to,
The Viome is more on the line of that.
but you make food recommendations?
What I'm doing with patients, and yes, there is, I do work on diet, but what I'm doing is reestablishing the balance in the gut microbiome when it's gone out of balance.
Well, that's my last question. Can we eat for specific microbe, addition or subtraction?
You
Does
know,
that
what's
make
interesting
sense?
is that we talk a lot about eating. There was a study that showed that fasting can also increase certain types of microbes in the gut. The one I mentioned was Akkermansia muciniphila, which in a lot of people, when it's low, it's associated with weight gain and obesity.
Right.
And when it's high, it's actually associated with proper metabolic balance and balanced blood sugar levels.
So instead of eating for Akkermansia, you can fast
Well,
and
you've
have it
got
go.
to incorporate all of the recommendations, the time-restricted eating, and then eat the right foods or figure out what is the right template of the types of foods, because food is information. So you have to think of it when you're eating, you're actually eating for your microbiome. And how would you eat if it was to eat for your microbiome so you can be the healthiest possible?
So those are my questions. Thank you for the answers. And does our audience have some? I see in the back, please.
We will bring a mic to you.
We can, but I think the room is small enough that you can speak.
How often
It's always good to.
should the microbiome test be done?
Yeah, so the question is, how often should the microbiome test be done? We recommend every 3 months, and in fact, soon we're going with a subscription model where that's going to be included in the subscription. But there's lots of people that they change their diet and they're super happy and they're like, thank you very much, see you later. And so we probably won't hear from them until they get worse again. But the microbiome is changing continuously because we are interacting with the environment, and especially if you take antibiotics, it'll severely change your microbiome, and then you have to change your diet afterwards.
I mean, it's been shown in studies that dietary change results in a change in the microbiome within 24 to 48 hours.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Right there, please.
A quick question, if you're thinking systemically about feeding a family, how do you integrate practices such as those you've spoken about when you might be feeding a family of 5 or 7?
I would say that you've got to start when they're young before they can develop bad habits. And you have to expand their palate so wide that when it narrows when they're 3 years old, that they still will keep pieces of this more expanded palate. So like for my son, we used to make a soup with onions, garlic, all sorts of vegetables in there, puree it, and he would drink it when he was still a toddler. But that expanded his palate, and then once he was eating, we incorporated salad, and now as a 14-year-old, he shocks people when he goes out because he'll be the one kid with his friends who's asking, can I order a salad with dinner? So you've got to start young before their palate goes like that. And then maybe if they're older, just start, maybe with a little bit of mindset training. Like, hey, your taste buds change every 7 years. So maybe something that you used to not like, why don't you try it again? Maybe it won't be so bad.
In my family, we have 3 different diets, and we all cook. And to me, that's the best way. Engage your whole family, and you can have sort of a core meal that satisfies everyone, and then you can have several additional side meals, and that they're all for different family members, and they all get to cook
That sounds good.
and socialize.
Right here?
Okay.
Yes?
One second.
Just 1 second.
One second. Right here. Thank you.
Is the effect of fiber as good if you're getting it through a smoothie? If you take the same amount of spinach, kale, whatever, versus eating it directly, how does that affect the fiber?
It is, because it's not digestible by our enzymes, so it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the same. You
It's
can
the
put it
same
in
effect.
any format you want. Yeah.
I'm a big fan of that because doing that is a great way to start getting your servings of vegetables for the day, and just makes it really easy for your digestive system to use up.
Yeah, and I really want to reiterate, if you're not going to do a precision test, then start slow with these fibers because they can cause very, very bad things like lots of gas and bloating, and they can cause SIBO. Read about SIBO. It's not very fun. It doesn't just go away.
And if you increase fiber, you need to increase your water intake, because if you don't, fiber will constipate you.
Interesting. Yes, Karen?
My question is, does the microbiome affect hormones?
There's some literature. You can actually read about it, but I'm not going to make any conclusion at this point.
Yeah, we know that microbiome relates to hormone circulation in and out of the body. So for example, when estrogen is conjugated and secreted by the liver and the bile into the stool, if you have an overpredominance of certain bacteria that have an enzyme called beta-glucuronidase, they can cleave that bond and then release the estrogen, and the estrogen recirculates into the body, being one of the factors in creating estrogen dominance. I also know that your microbiome is necessary for partially converting thyroid hormone T4 into T3. About 20% of the body's production of T3 is actually coming through enteric circulation and back into the body. The rest is being converted in the body. For those of you who know thyroid, T4 is the main hormone produced by the thyroid, but T3 is the active component of the thyroid hormone. So it's very important. When balancing hormone, I just know clinically from seeing my experience with patients that you need to balance the gut microbiome in order to have more balanced hormones.
Wow, so many questions.
Anywhere over there?
This is a deep topic.
We'll be available at lunchtime, and
Yes,
find us.
And into the
yes. We have one more little fun presentation after a couple more questions, then lunch, and you'll meet all the speakers at lunch. In fact, we should have networking tables. I don't know if we've done that, but we're supposed to.
What
Yes.
is the top probiotic you recommend?
As a pill, do you mean?
Yes, a supplement.
A
BSL number 3 was
Ooh.
recommended to me, then I
Yeah.
found out that it was a stolen patent. so
That is
now
that's a difficult question to answer, but as a general rule of thumb, a multi-probiotic that has different strains of Lactobacillus bifidobacterium, Strep thermophilus, and maybe Saccharomyces boulardii, which is a yeast. Yeah, it's a
So
lot.
everything.
But it depends, because one thing I
depends.
didn't mention in my lecture is that we've got about anywhere between 500, maybe up to 2,000 species of bacteria in our gut. So even a probiotic supplement that has 10 different strains, just think about what a small representation that is to what needs to happen in the gut to create balance. Now, that said, I see probiotic supplements help rebalance the gut for people, and there's evidence that some probiotics actually help influence the lineages of other bacteria in the gut. For example, like the spore-based probiotics actually increase the amount of bifido and lacto in the gut. So it's it's kind of complex because it depends on what the underlying issue is. So, and the strength of the probiotics. So if you have a yeast overgrowth, I have patients that I treat with probiotics that are 225 billion colony-forming units, or CFUs, until we start getting the yeast under control and I start dropping the probiotic. But always remembering that it's not just about probiotic, it's about diet. And the way you ultimately control your microbiome is through your diet, but also through balance, meditation, relaxation, stress management.
Yes?
Mentioned one thing you did or one thing you ate that transformed your
mystery.
health.
Yeah.
Yes?
Yeah, so do we have 3 minutes? Okay, so you can write this down. The molecule is called NEU5GC, NEU5GC. So this molecule is a type of a sugar called sialic acid, and it's produced by all mammals except for humans. So we have the ability to consume it from all mammalian products. That's all red meats and all dairy products, right? And we have the ability to absorb it into our body and actually incorporate it on the cell surface of our own cells, because we used to do that as humans until we lost the ability to produce it about 2 million years ago. So I integrate that molecule into my own cells, and my immune system says, well, wait a minute, this is not your molecule, this is a foreign molecule. And because it's a sugar, the immune response is very weak. And so it takes time for it to mount. But basically, my immune system continuously thinks that there's a foreign body in my system. And so it mounts this inflammatory response, and it destroys my joints, it destroys my soft tissues, and it destroyed my blood-brain barrier, which is why I had psychological problems or neurological problems. Not psychological, I was fine. So,
When you ate red meat, is that what?
yeah, so anything that comes from mammals, right? Mammals are a group of animals that produce milk, right, that lactate. So anything that comes from them, if I consume that, my immune system will increase inflammation and I will have problems, right? So this was diagnosed, so I'm seronegative rheumatoid arthritis and HLA-B27 positive ankylosing spondylitis, and I was diagnosed by doctors as having an autoimmune disease. That is 100% false, 100%. I do not have autoimmunity at all. As soon as I removed that molecule from my body, a month later I felt better, 2 months later I felt great, and a year later I was completely healed. So there was no autoimmune whatsoever.
Please say what the molecule was.
Yeah, so the molecule is this new 5GC.
No, is it red meat? Is it meat? Is it
Any red meat,
Give
any
some
milk.
examples,
So chicken, so not chicken, sorry, pork, lamb, beef, right? So it's bad. So pork, beef, and lamb are bad for me, right? For me. Now this is a genetic defect in 100% of all humans, right? So I know that I'm not the only one. I actually met with the professor who discovered this mechanism, and he'd talked to many other people who discovered the same thing about themselves and completely cured themselves. So I know I'm not the only one. I just don't know how common this is. I don't know if 100 million people have increased inflammation due to this, or 5,000 people in the world. I have no idea, but I think it's very common. I just don't have any evidence for it. So all red meat, so when people say pork is a white meat, no, it's not. Well, I mean, red meat is not a scientific term. The scientific term is any product that comes from a mammal, and mammal is very well defined scientifically. You don't have to guess. Like chickens are not mammals. You cannot milk a chicken, right? Fish are not mammals. If you cannot milk it, it's not a mammal. So yeah, I used to go to restaurants and say, I cannot eat anything mammalian. They're like, so you can't have chicken? No, you cannot milk chicken.
That's a great use of the 3 minutes. One more question, and we are...
I just want to say, so for your own research, if you just Google new 5GC, and then a term such as inflammation or cancer. So this is one of the main studies that drove WHO to name red meat a carcinogen, right? So the cat's out of the bag, but of course there are many people who do not want this to be known, right? But look at the paper, the seminal paper was published in late 2014 that this molecule drives immunity, which drives inflammation and drives cancer. So look it up. It's pretty
Thank
cool.
you. One more question, Laura.
Have you known about it?
Mine's more of a comment, but a few years ago, I went through a lot of chronic stress and developed diverticulitis.
Louder.
And so what happened was I went on a course, a path of self-healing. But there was this one place I couldn't get rid of inflammation in my left side of my colon. So I did the Viome test. And in 4 days after avoiding the foods, which by the way, every morning I was having a smoothie with green apple juice. I'm allergic to green apples. That was a void. Red peppers, yellow peppers, all the things I was eating. 4 days after I stopped, the inflammation went away, and it's been 6 months.
Wow.
So I just wanted to say that to
Bravo.
everyone.
Thank you.
Here we go.
It's so true.
Thank you all.